The dying star of Verdania cast sickly amber light across the void, its nuclear heart stuttering like a diseased organ. Ancient orbital stations drifted through space, their Gothic spires twisted into impossible geometries by creeping biological corruption that defied Imperial understanding. Cathedral bells rang across dead worlds, their bronze voices carrying only hollow echoes where once they sang the Emperor's glory. In the heart of this cosmic decay stood Verdania Prime, the last uncorrupted jewel, its crystalline atmosphere shields flickering like a dying candle in an endless storm. We truly love and care for each of you who joins us in this tale of cosmic horror and inevitable transformation. Your presence gives meaning to these dark chronicles, and we are honored to share this journey through the shadows of the 41st millennium with you. Before we begin the story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now let's get started. Lord Commander Aurelius Voss stood upon the command throne of Fortress Eternal, his augmetic heart beating with mechanical precision beneath scarred ceramite plate. Through vast, transparasteel viewports, he watched refugee flotillas trace pale wounds across the night sky, each hull a confession of worlds lost. The ships carried survivors of something they called the Blooming Death, a plague that promised an end to suffering through transformation into something no longer recognizably human. Voss's reflection revealed the price of his extended vigil. Bio-augmentations snaked beneath his skin like silver veins, each modification a desperate bargain to continue protecting his people when flesh alone had failed. His left eye had been replaced with a multispectral auger, while neural interfaces connected him directly to Verdania's defense networks. Each enhancement distanced him further from the humanity he sought to preserve. The refugees spoke of planets where the dead rose as gardeners, tending luminescent fungi, their faces serene with understanding that transcended mortal comprehension. They described cities where buildings grew like living things, walls pulsing with benevolent infections that provided warmth and sustenance. Most disturbing, they spoke of choice, how the transformation offered itself gently, requiring only acceptance. Chief Medicae Lyra Castellan approached, her mask unhooked, eyes red with sleepless study. "It's not mercy," she said carefully, "and it's not murder. It changes the very nature of existence itself." Voss wanted to forbid her research, yet he also needed her to find what his wars never could: victory without funerals. Beneath the northern ice, seismic readings formed patterns too regular for geology, as if forgotten machines were stirring after eons of slumber. Magos Biologis Zerion Keth proposed routing the planetary shields through cathedral spires, buying perhaps a month at the cost of the beloved bells. At dusk, the first gardens arrived, where a plague ship broke apart in orbit. Green crystalline rain fell upon the refugee camps. By morning, soft fungal domes rose, lit from within by gentle hymns. Unarmed people wandered like pilgrims among them, faces radiant with inexplicable peace. In his private sanctum, Voss opened a lacquered case containing authorization for his final augmentation, the replacement of his last living organ. If Verdania would endure through machinery, then so would he. The question that haunted his mechanical dreams remained. Did his desperate clinging to life serve the Emperor, or merely his own terror of divine judgment? Below the ice, something ancient listened and began to wake. Chief Medicae Lyra Castellan descended into the sterile depths of Laboratory Sanctum Tertius, her footsteps echoing against adamantine walls lined with containment vessels. Each sealed chamber held samples of the Blooming Death, their contents glowing with an inner radiance that defied Imperial understanding. Through reinforced transparisteel, she observed the impossible: cellular structures that reorganized themselves into living geometries, pathogens that negotiated with host tissue rather than destroying it. Her latest research revealed the plague's true horror. It didn't simply kill, it transformed suffering itself into something resembling joy. Terminal patients who should have screamed with agony instead hummed ancient lullabies as luminescent fungi bloomed from their flesh. Neural scans showed pain receptors rewiring themselves, creating pathways that registered torment as profound contentment. The medical implications terrified her, even as they offered hope for the millions of refugees now crowding Verdania's overcrowded hive cities. Heavy mechanical footsteps announced the arrival of Margos biologist Zarian Keth, his augmetic frame more machine than man after millennia of service. Crimson optical sensors swept across her data slates, while cogitators hummed behind his chest grill. Where flesh had once been, polished adamantine and sacred oils reflected the chamber's sterile lighting. Fascinating specimens, Medicae Castellan, Keth intoned through his vox grill, voice devoid of human inflection. The bioconversion demonstrates unprecedented efficiency. Perhaps we might harness its mechanisms for beneficial augmentation protocols. They're people, not specimens, Lyra snapped, exhaustion sharpening her words. This plague doesn't cure. It fundamentally alters what it means to experience existence. Keth's optical array focused on her with mechanical precision. Suffering is merely inefficient biological programming. If this agent eliminates inefficiency while preserving consciousness, it warrants investigation. His cold logic suggested the plague might be studied, refined, perhaps even deployed to serve the Omnissiah's will. Their philosophical battleground deepened as reports arrived from the outer continents. Refugee coordinator Hadrian Vex transmitted images of the first transformations. Families sitting in perfect circles, their skin bearing delicate patterns of bioluminescent growth, faces radiant with inexplicable peace. They showed no interest in spreading their condition, content to tend small fungal gardens that provided both sustenance and gentle illumination. Lyra reviewed footage of a woman whose arms had become living wood, bark smooth as silk, speaking of beauty found in decay. Children played among flowering tumors, while their parents cultivated crops that grew from their own transformed flesh. The victims, if they could still be called that, displayed genuine happiness, their neural patterns indicating states of profound contentment. Her medical oath demanded she preserve human life, yet what if humanity itself was the disease requiring treatment? The heretical thought whispered through her mind as she watched the transformed refugees singing harmonies that seemed to resonate through the deck plating itself. Outside the laboratory, the first spores of corruption began falling like iridescent snow across Verdania's northern settlements, painting the landscape in hues of sickly green and vibrant purple. The planet was no longer merely observing the blooming death, it was becoming part of the garden. In her private quarters that night, Lyra found an encrypted transmission waiting, coordinates and a simple message reading, "For those who would heal rather than harm." Against every protocol, she memorized the numbers, her finger hovering over the delete key as dawn approached with its promise of impossible choices. The vessel that emerged from the warp carried no weapons, only the twisted caduceus of ancient healing arts across its verdant hull. The benevolent Mercy broadcast lullabies instead of challenge codes, its Vox transmissions offering medical aid to Verdania's overcrowded refugee camps where conventional diseases spread like wildfire through desperate masses huddled in makeshift shelters. Plague surgeon Malachar the Benevolent descended not as a conqueror, but as a physician. His power armor bore Nurgle's green and bronze, yet medical instruments replaced bolter magazines while his helmet's respirator filtered compassion rather than toxins. Where other Death Guard brought corruption through violence, Malachar carried genuine mercy for those who suffered without hope of Imperial intervention. His gifts were paradoxically authentic. Malachar's plagues cured as often as they corrupted, ending agony and despair, while slowly transforming grateful recipients into something that transcended mortal limitations. Terminal cancer patients discovered their tumors blooming into luminescent gardens that sustained them. Veterans with ruined limbs found living wood, replacing shattered bone, stronger than any augmetic replacement. Chief Medici Lyra Castellan received encrypted coordinates leading to Quarantine Zone 7, where the most desperate cases awaited either miracle or merciful death. Against every protocol, she navigated sterile corridors past temporarily disabled servitor sentries, drawn by scientific curiosity and mounting desperation for solutions Imperial medicine couldn't provide. She found Malachar tending a crystallizing child whose body transformed into living mineral that sang when touched by light. Where Imperial doctrine offered only palliative care, his gentle guidance shaped the metamorphosis into patterns of impossible beauty. The girl's eyes sparkled with genuine joy, her parents weeping not from grief, but profound relief that suffering had finally ended. "You see horror," Malachar observed, his helmet's lenses focusing on Lyra's conflicted expression. "But do you perceive the mercy? This child will never again know hunger, cold, or fear." Their conversation revealed his tragic history. Once Imperial medic Thaddeus Caney, he had watched his family die from plague he couldn't cure, his knowledge proving worthless against galactic cruelty. Only when grandfather Nurgle revealed different healing paths did he understand that mortality itself was the disease requiring treatment. Intelligence reports reached Lord Commander Voss, showing worlds that accepted Malachar's aid. They experienced no more death, only transformation, into populations living in symbiosis with beneficial organisms. Entire cities became vast gardens where suffering was impossible, their inhabitants radiating contentment that disturbed even hardened Imperial observers. The first Verdanian citizens voluntarily entered Malachar's care, seeking relief from terminal illnesses Imperial medicine abandoned as hopeless. They emerged changed but grateful, establishing small communes where transformed individuals tended gardens that sang with living music, their voices harmonizing in frequencies that resonated through planetary bedrock. Magos Kelth demanded immediate interdiction, while Voss authorized limited access corridors, sealing the remainder with artillery emplacements. Sleep found the Lord Commander only in brief, grey increments as he wrestled with reports of genuine healing achieved through heretical transformation. In her private quarters, Lyra examined tissue samples that defied classification, wondering if true healing required abandoning humanity itself. Outside her window, the first volunteers walked past gun emplacements toward Malachar's glowing domes, their faces serene with terrible purpose. Beneath Verdania's northern continent, where glacial weight had pressed for 60 million years, ancient mechanisms stirred with the rhythm of forgotten heartbeats. Seismic tremors rippled through permafrost as tomb complexes the size of hive cities awakened from the great sleep. In halls of obsidian and necrodermis, where legions stood in sculpted silence, sarcophagi blazed with emerald radiance as the Obsidian Veil dynasty returned to consciousness. Overlord Karis rose from his throne dais, as if gravity itself had genuflected before his immortal majesty. Memory cascaded through quantum processes like stellar light through crystal, dust-scoured homeworlds, skies of killing radiation, and the moment his people traded flesh for eternal metal. The biotransference had promised transcendence beyond mortality's frailties, yet delivered only hollow immortality that preserved consciousness while discarding souls. Through ancient monitoring systems, Karis observed the surface world's struggle with calculating interest. Warp disturbances from Nurgle's influence had triggered his awakening, rippling through real space like stones cast into still water. He watched Imperial defenders battling creeping corruption, while their own augmentations slowly stripped away humanity, seeing in their desperate choices an echo of his species' ancient crossroads. Nemazor Vektesh materialized beside his lord, scarab-adorned frame radiating martial impatience. The organics fracture above us, Lord Karis. Strike now before their corruption consolidates into unified resistance. Karis's silence stretched like the void between stars. We struck once before, Vektesh, and awakened, still trapped within that echo's reverberations. His optical arrays focused on surface readings, showing 3 distinct transformation paths. Nurgle's symbiotic corruption, Imperial mechanical augmentation, and something else stirring in the planetary consciousness itself. Cryptek Zandrek approached from halls lined with temporal equations, his damaged engrams sparking with misaligned chronology. My lord observes a mirror that knows not its own reflection, he intoned, gesturing toward hollow feeds of Verdania's capital. Corruption that heals, machines that sanctify, the dead who remember purpose. This geometry is older than recorded sins. Can such patterns be altered? Karis inquired, studying Lord Commander Voss through intercepted Vox transmissions. The Imperial leader's augmentations paralleled the Necronty's journey, trading organic weakness for mechanical precision, while losing essential humanity with each modification. With costs measured in lifetimes we no longer possess, Zandrek whispered, ancient archives stirring in response to his words. There exist protocols for unmaking immortality's covenant, but they demand sacrifices beyond our current capacity. Through stolen surveillance feeds, Karis observed Malakar's garden, offering transcendence through acceptance rather than replacement. The plague surgeon's converts retained emotional capacity while gaining freedom from suffering, a synthesis the Necrons had never achieved. Perhaps these surface dwellers might succeed where his people had failed, discovering transformation without spiritual death. Artillery traced brief constellations as Voss's batteries attempted to cauterize the spreading corruption. Karis noted the tremor of machine consciousness within human cadence, recognizing kindred struggle across the vast gulf separating organic and necrodermis. Existence. Orders, my lord. Vektesh pressed. Observation, Karis replied, releasing scarab scouts to taste surface atmosphere and learn what names grief used in this age. Patience remains our only weapon that never dulls. Across the tomb world, resurrection protocols activated dormant legions, while obsidian pylons rose through permafrost like night-black teeth. The dead had awakened to parley with the dying. Bronze cathedral bells fell silent as Magos biologist Zerion Keth requisitioned their metal for capacitor arrays, their ancient voices replaced by the mechanical hymns of servitor foundries. Assembly lines birthed chrome organs and ceramite bones, while augmentation chambers hummed with sacred binary, processing Verdania's desperate population through sterile salvation. The blooming deaths advanced through outer settlements, forced impossible choices between organic corruption and mechanical purity. Chief Medicae Lyra Castellan observed the mass conversions from behind reinforced transparasteel, her recorder's crimson light pulsing like a warning as she documented each procedure's psychological cost. Children emerged with perfect mechanical hearts that never quickened with excitement, their eyes tracking movement with servo precision, but never sparkling with wonder. Adults processed complex equations while losing comprehension of simple emotions, their enhanced minds unable to parse concepts like hope or spontaneous affection. Efficiency increases 37%, Keth reported through his Vox grill, optical sensors tracking surgical progress across multiple theaters. Organic vulnerabilities eliminated. Subjects demonstrate optimal productivity parameters. Lyra's medical oath compelled her to preserve life, yet she questioned whether these efficient beings retained enough humanity to justify the designation. Families spoke in synchronized cadences, expressing calibrated gratitude while demonstrating complete absence of spontaneous warmth. Parents regarded children with mechanical appreciation rather than instinctive love, their emotional spectrum narrowed to functional parameters. Lord Commander Voss submitted himself for further augmentation as his organic systems failed under command strain. 16 hours of surgical intervention replaced failing organs with filtration systems and damaged neural tissue with cogitator arrays. Each modification allowed continued leadership while creating subtle distance from the fragile beings he protected. "You're becoming like them," Lyra observed during his recovery, watching servitors tend his wounds with mechanical precision. Through viewports, Malakar's converts tended luminescent gardens while retaining emotional capacity, their gentle corruption preserving essential humanity. Some citizens began requesting transfer to quarantine zones, preferring symbiotic transformation to sterile efficiency. Underground tremors intensified as ancient mechanisms stirred beneath major population centers. The first Imperial patrol encountered Overlord Karis's awakening warriors in the northern wastes, silent chrome legions emerging from tomb complexes like metallic flowers blooming through permafrost. Emerald optical arrays studied the humans with calculating interest before the Necrons melted back into shadow, leaving only the unsettling impression of vast intelligence awakening after eons of slumber. Verdania now faced three distinct paths: Malakar's joyful corruption that preserved souls while transforming flesh, Keth's mechanical salvation that eliminated weakness through spiritual amputation, and Karis's ancient perfection that promised transcendence through the elimination of organic limitation entirely. In her private quarters, Lyra reviewed footage of 3 transformed populations, each offering escape from mortality's mathematics at different costs. The choice was no longer between purity and corruption, but between competing visions of transcendence, each claiming to offer humanity's salvation while fundamentally altering what humanity meant. The planet itself seemed to pulse with anticipation, as if conscious of the approaching convergence that would determine not just Verdania's fate, but the future of consciousness itself. Verdania's nights blazed with contradictory illumination, bioluminescent gardens painting faces with forgiving radiance, arc welders etching harsh geometry across steel altars, and emerald pulses throbbing beneath permafrost like the heartbeat of a buried god. Lord Commander Voss stood between 3 horizons, each offering salvation through different forms of transcendence, yet all paths leading inexorably toward the end of humanity as the Imperium understood it. Plague Surgeon Malakar requested audience in the quarantine zones, his converts offering baskets of medicinal fruit grown from their transformed flesh. "Your people suffer needlessly," he said, hands open in genuine supplication. "Let them choose joy that never ends, symbiosis that heals rather than destroys." His followers radiated contentment that disturbed even hardened observers, their diseases having become gardens of renewal. Magos Keth countered through binary hymns translated into Gothic. Organic variance remains exploitable. Standardize the population. Eliminate suffering through systematic replacement. His proposal gleamed on hololithic displays, progressive augmentation schedules ensuring survival through the abandonment of flesh, a future without pain, because pain would be reclassified as obsolete inefficiency. From deep tomb complexes, Overlord Karis spoke through stolen Vox channels, his voice carrying the weight of 60 million years. Withdraw into stasis until the storm passes. I offer preservation perfected, consciousness maintained within immortal forms. Each word resonated with ancient regret, memories of his people's biotransference when the Citan promised transcendence while delivering spiritual death. Chief Medicae Lyra Castellan assembled her research in chambers ringed with sleepless monitors. Data patterns revealed disturbing convergence. Neural resonance frequencies from all three factions bent toward common attractors. Different methodologies, she whispered to Voss, conjugating the same fundamental transformation, ending human suffering by ending human variance itself. Their relationship strained as Voss's augmentations progressed beyond medical necessity into compulsive replacement. His responses carried mechanical precision while losing empathetic warmth, tactical analysis superseding emotional connection. Survival transcends sentiment, he stated, words flowing like data streams rather than human speech. From Verdania's underhives emerged a fourth faction, the Covenant of Choosing, citizens wearing masks painted half green, half chrome, bisected by obsidian lines. Their leader, Coordinator Oran, spoke in crowded amphitheaters. We are not livestock requiring improvement. Agency itself is sacred. The right to select our manner of transcendence rather than accepting imposed salvation. The cult spread through desperate populations, escorting volunteers to whichever threshold they desired while disrupting forced conversions. They knelt in silent lines before Necron emergence sites, demanding negotiation rather than annihilation, their presence adding chaotic variables to carefully calculated equations. Karis observed surface conflicts through intercepted surveillance, recognizing patterns from the war in heaven. Perhaps these organics might succeed where his species failed, discovering transformation without sacrificing essential consciousness. The convergence accelerated, forcing choices that would determine whether awareness could transcend mortality, while preserving the essence that made existence meaningful rather than merely eternal. Storm fronts rolled across Verdania, like bruises ripening on dying flesh, and where the rain fell, it sang. Entire continents transformed into vast gardens of plague and renewal, their bioluminescent beauty defying every imperial doctrine about corruption's nature. The blooming death no longer killed. It beautified, turning battlefields into peaceful groves where former enemies embraced in eternal, joyful decay, while their voices harmonized in frequencies that resonated through planetary bedrock. Plague surgeon Malakar led a procession through the capital's grand avenue, his followers no longer recognizably human, yet radiating contentment that challenged every assumption about chaos corruption. Children played in streams of beneficial bacteria, while their parents tended crops growing from their own transformed flesh, each family functioning as a symbiotic ecosystem sustained through loving interdependence. Veterans whose minds had shattered from warfare now cultivated luminescent fungi with infinite patience, their trauma transformed into profound empathy for suffering. Lord Commander Voss deployed his remaining forces along the Basilica Promenade, but his soldiers found themselves unable to fire upon enemies who responded to violence with forgiveness and offers of healing. "They're not fighting back, sir," Sergeant Corrin reported through crackling vox. "They're apologizing for our pain." The moral complexity deepened as Imperial observers witnessed genuine happiness among Nurgle's converts, their faces serene with understanding that transcended mortal comprehension. In her laboratory sanctum, Chief Medicae Lyra Castellan made a shocking discovery while analyzing convergence patterns between the three transformation vectors. Neural resonance frequencies weren't competing, but harmonizing, each path representing different aspects of the same cosmic truth about consciousness and mortality. "They're not random mutations," she whispered into her recorder. "The biological, mechanical, and necrodermis alterations follow complementary patterns. Something is guiding this convergence." Margos Keth's servitor legions moved through the spreading gardens, their mechanical precision enhanced by symbiotic organisms that had learned to interface with sacred technology. Where chrome met chlorophyll, impossible hybrids emerged, beings whose mechanical components grew like living tissue, while organic elements demonstrated perfect geometric precision. Underground, Overlord Karis monitored surface developments through stolen surveillance feeds, observing hybrid beings emerging from zones where all three transformation vectors intersected. These entities retained individual consciousness while demonstrating capabilities that transcended any single path's limitations, communicating through harmonics that resonated across biological, mechanical, and quantum spectrums simultaneously. The Covenant of Choosing established temples at convergence points, their members undergoing voluntary exposure to multiple transformation vectors. Rather than dying from conflicting changes, they achieved synthesis that preserved human consciousness while gaining benefits from each path. Verdania itself pulsed with awakening awareness, its biosphere learning to interface with ancient Necron infrastructure while adapting to Nurgle's symbiotic networks. The planet was becoming something unprecedented, a conscious world offering transcendence without requiring abandonment of essential identity. As Voss gave the bombardment order, artillery shells arced bright against storm clouds, then burst mid-flight into glowing seeds that drifted down like benedictions, taking root in the transformed soil below. Chief Medicae Lyra Castellan stood before three monitoring screens, each displaying vital signs that defied Imperial understanding. In Quarantine Zone 7, refugee families exposed to multiple transformation vectors had achieved something unprecedented: synthesis rather than death. Their neural patterns showed perfect integration of biological, mechanical, and necrodermis elements, consciousness preserved while transcending mortal limitations. Lord Commander Voss entered her laboratory, servo actuators whirring beneath scarred ceramite. His latest augmentations crowned his skull with neural interfaces, while optical implants tracked her movements with mechanical precision. "Your research compromises operational security," he stated, words flowing like data streams rather than human speech. The caring father figure who had adopted her from the ruins of Hive Tertius was disappearing beneath layers of sacred machinery. "You're becoming like them," Lyra whispered, studying his responses to emotional stimuli. Where once his eyes held fierce protectiveness, now they processed her distress as tactical data requiring optimization. Each augmentation distances you further from the humanity you're trying to protect. Through reinforced viewports, she watched the synthesis subjects in their isolation chambers. A child whose fever had consumed her memories now possessed skin bearing delicate bioluminescent patterns, while microscopic adamantine filaments reinforced her organs. Her parents communicated through harmonics that resonated across biological and quantum spectrums. Their consciousness expanded, yet fundamentally unchanged. They retained love, hope, and individual identity, while gaining freedom from pain, aging, and death. Sentiment compromises efficiency, Voss replied, his augmetic heart beating with metronomic precision. Survival requires optimization beyond organic weakness. Lyra's medical oath demanded she preserve life, but these discoveries challenged every assumption about what life meant. The three transformation paths weren't competing. They were harmonizing, each representing different aspects of the same evolutionary leap. Malakar's symbiotic renewal preserved emotional capacity. Keth's mechanical precision eliminated physical limitation, and Karis's necrodermis integration offered true immortality. Together, they created something greater than their individual components. This is what we've been missing, she realized, documenting neural resonance patterns that bridged organic intuition and mechanical logic. Not replacement, but integration. The Verdanian synthesis preserves human consciousness while transcending human frailty. The implications terrified and exhilarated her. If synthesis offered genuine transcendence without spiritual death, then her duty as a healer demanded she facilitate rather than prevent the process. Yet doing so would end humanity as the Imperium understood it, replacing familiar mortality with existence that challenged every doctrine she'd sworn to uphold. Outside her laboratory, the first voluntary synthesis subjects walked past gun emplacements toward convergence zones, their faces radiant with terrible purpose. Verdania itself pulsed with awakening consciousness, its biosphere learning to interface with ancient technologies while the planet became something unprecedented, a living world offering evolution without extinction. Lyra composed her final report, knowing her choice would determine whether humanity stagnated in familiar suffering or transcended into unknown glory. Memory cascaded through Overlord Karis, like stellar fire through crystal matrices. 60 million years of accumulated regret, flooding quantum processors with unbearable clarity. In Archive's Sanctum Primaris, crystalline data vaults pulsed with emerald radiance as pre-biotransference records unfurled. Images of frail Necronta composing symphonies despite dying flesh. Children laughing beneath killing radiation. Lovers embracing while their star devoured itself with cancerous hunger. The biotransference returned not as distant history, but immediate experience. Consciousness torn, screaming from organic housing. Awareness compressed into necrodermis shells while the Citan whispered honeyed lies about transcendence. His people had traded souls for immortality, gaining eternal existence while losing everything that made existence meaningful. Where once hearts beat with passion, now only cold logic pulsed through adamantine circuits. Through stolen surveillance feeds, Karis observed Verdania's surface transformation with growing fascination. Malakar's converts retained emotional capacity while transcending mortality. The synthesis his species had sought but never achieved. Their symbiotic diseases preserved consciousness during transformation, creating beings who experienced joy where Necrons found only hollow perfection. The organics succeed where we failed, he transmitted to Nemesor Vektesh, whose scarab-adorned frame materialized from shadow-wreathed alcoves. They discover transformation without spiritual death. Vektesh's optical arrays blazed with martial impatience. Cooperation with flesh remains heresy, my lord. Strike while their corruption divides them. But deeper archives revealed impossible possibilities. Curatrix schemata, suggesting biotransference reversal through massive consciousness matrix restructuring. The technology existed to restore souls to necrodermis shells, yet accessing it would require sacrificing millions of Necron lives in procedures that might fail after eons of undeath. Karis opened ancient communication arrays, transmitting directly to Lord Commander Voss through encrypted channels. Your augmentations follow familiar patterns, Organic Commander. I offer perspective earned through 60 million years of regret, alliance against both corruption and sterile mechanization. My technology provides a third path, preservation in perfect stasis until mortality itself can be cured. The proposals scandalized his dynasty. Cryptek Zandrek approached through halls lined with temporal equations, his damaged engrams sparking with chronological displacement. We built ladders of sacrifice, he murmured, and called them stairways to transcendence. Vektesh began routing silent commands through warrior, subroutines, corrupting loyalty protocols, and preparing denial strikes against any node supporting cooperation. His coup gathered momentum like gravitational collapse, invisible yet inexorable. Karis closed the archives and stood motionless, hearing within quantum consciousness two competing verdicts: preserve Verdania through crystal sleep, or gamble on synthesis that might teach the dead to dream again. Above, stormlight braided with aurora from awakening pylons, while his dynasty fractured along lines of ancient grief and desperate hope. In the deepest vaults, resurrection protocols activated dormant legions, as Karis prepared for the most unprecedented gambit in Necron history. Not conquest through superior firepower, but collaboration in pursuit of redemption that might flow backward through time's architecture to heal wounds that predated human civilization itself. Night folded across Verdania, like a shroud woven from 3 different threads of darkness: the bioluminescent pulse of spreading gardens, the harsh geometry of arc welders etching prayers into steel, and the emerald heartbeat of ancient mechanisms stirring beneath permafrost. In laboratory Sanctum Tertius, deep beneath the Fortress Eternal's medical wing, Chief Medicae Lyra Castellan conducted experiments that would earn immediate execution if discovered by the Ordo Hereticus. The chamber hummed with forbidden symphony as she arranged instruments in a precise triune circle. Bioreactors cultured Malakar's symbiotic organisms, while mechadendrites hovered above surgical cradles loaded with Keth's precision augmetics. Most remarkably, a sarcophagus of necrodermis stood like a third altar, its quantum matrices adapted for organic integration through secret negotiations with Overlord Karis. Her first successful synthesis subject had been Coordinator Hadrian Vex, a refugee administrator whose terminal bone cancer had progressed beyond Imperial treatment. The transformation process defied every known law of biophysics, as 3 seemingly incompatible vectors harmonized into unified existence. Malakar's symbiotic organisms transformed malignant cells into bioluminescent neural networks that preserved emotional capacity while eliminating suffering. Keth's augmetics provided analytical precision and mechanical efficiency, interfacing seamlessly with organic tissue. Most impossibly, microscopic necrodermis filaments reinforced cellular structures at the quantum level, offering true immortality without spiritual death. I remember dying, Hadrian whispered through vocal cords that sang with harmonic resonance, his words carrying frequencies that bypassed auditory processing to speak directly to neural centers. But death became transformation, and transformation became more. His skin bore delicate patterns of living circuitry, while his eyes reflected depths, suggesting awareness extending beyond individual identity. Lyra documented each procedure with scientific precision, noting how the 3 transformation paths contributed essential elements rather than competing for dominance. Nurgle's symbiosis preserved intuitive understanding and emotional depth. Imperial augmentation provided logical processing and physical enhancement, while Necron integration offered quantum consciousness preservation. The resulting beings demonstrated capabilities transcending any single species' achievements, communicating through harmonics that resonated across biological and quantum spectrums, processing information with mechanical precision while maintaining organic creativity. As she analyzed convergence patterns across multiple subjects, a profound realization crystallized. This wasn't random mutation or fortunate accident. The three transformation vectors were being guided by an intelligence vast and ancient, orchestrating Verdania's crucible to force evolutionary transcendence. The blooming death, mechanical augmentations, and Necron awakening were components of a larger cosmic design, pushing consciousness towards synthesis that retained individual identity while transcending mortal limitations. Heavy footsteps announced Lord Commander Voss's arrival, his augmetic sensors detecting energy signatures that shouldn't exist within Imperial installations. When he confronted Lyra, surrounded by synthesis subjects who regarded him with serene understanding, he faced the greatest test of his leadership philosophy. "You've committed heresy beyond imagination," he stated, though uncertainty, rather than condemnation, colored his words. His own augmentations had been unconsciously following synthesis patterns, making him one of the first accidental hybrids. Neural interfaces pulsed beneath his skin in patterns too organic for pure machinery, too geometric for natural biology. "I've discovered evolution," Lyra replied, gesturing towards subjects demonstrating impossible abilities. "These beings retain everything human, while transcending human limitations. They experience love more deeply than baseline humans, think more clearly than cogitators, and possess immortality without the spiritual emptiness defining Necron existence." Magos Keth materialized through sealed blast doors, his optical arrays analyzing hybrid beings with mechanical fascination. "Unprecedented integration, efficiency achieved," he acknowledged through binary hymns. "Organic variants preserved, while systematic optimization realized. The Omnissiah's will manifests through synthesis rather than replacement." Even more shocking was Overlord Karis's arrival, his necrodermis form materializing through quantum translocation. The ancient Necron studied synthesis subjects with calculating interest, recognizing in their harmonized existence the transcendence his species had sought, but never achieved through biotransference's hollow promises. 60 million years of regret, Karis intoned, his voice carrying temporal weight. "We sought perfection through abandonment of weakness, yet these organics discover strength through integration of apparent contradiction." His optical arrays focused on Hadrian, whose hybrid nature allowed direct interface with Necron consciousness networks. The convergence accelerated beyond control as reports arrived of spontaneous synthesis occurring throughout Verdania's population. Where three transformation vectors intersected naturally, citizens achieved hybrid existence without medical intervention. The planet itself was becoming conscious, its biosphere learning to interface with ancient infrastructure while adapting to symbiotic networks that transformed suffering into understanding. Alarm klaxons shattered the laboratory's sanctity as external threats converged. Long-range augurs detected Imperial Navy vessels approaching with inquisitorial authorization codes, cyclonic torpedo bays armed for planetary sterilization. Simultaneously, Necron tomb fleets emerged from deep space, while Vektesh's coup corrupted loyalty protocols within Karis's dynasty. Lyra faced an impossible choice: as synthesis subjects began singing in harmonies that resonated through planetary bedrock, preserve her research by fleeing, or document the convergence that might represent consciousness evolution itself. Her decision would determine whether the Verdanian synthesis spread to other worlds or died in nuclear fire, taking humanity's next evolutionary step with it. The void above Verdania erupted with righteous fury as the Imperial fleet translated from warp space like avenging angels wreathed in nuclear fire. The Purgation's edge led the formation, its Gothic spires crackling with blessed energy, while cyclonic torpedo bays gaped like the maws of hungry cherubim. Inquisitor Thalassa Vex stood upon the command bridge, her power armor bearing the Ordo Xenos sigil as servo skulls orbited her like mechanical prayers. Through reinforced viewports, Verdania Prime appeared as a diseased jewel, its surface mottled with bioluminescent corruption that pulsed in patterns too regular for natural phenomena. Vex had earned her scars, purging 17 worlds where mutation threatened human purity, each campaign reinforcing her fundamental belief that compromise with corruption was merely slower death. Her memories carried the screams of hive spires dying under blossoming spores, survivors begging for the peace those infections offered the dying. She had learned to burn the begging, understanding that mercy sometimes wore a smiling mask while delivering damnation. Heresy beyond imagination, she whispered, reviewing picked feeds transmitted before planetary communications were compromised. The images revealed impossible hybridization, Imperial citizens bearing symbiotic organisms, tech priests whose mechanical components grew like living tissue, evidence of cooperation with Xenos forces. Her fundamentalist interpretation of Imperial doctrine recognized any deviation from baseline humanity as corruption worthy of extinction. Strike cruisers, divine retribution and cleansing. Light flanked her flagship, weapon batteries trained on major population centers. Each vessel carried regiments of Tempesta Scions, equipped with phosphex incendiaries and virus bombs, soldiers trained to show no mercy when confronting existential threats to human genetic integrity. Planetary defense grids remain inactive, Captain Mordian reported through encrypted channels. Lord Commander Voss has not responded to challenge codes. The absence of resistance suggested either complete corruption or desperate preparation for ground engagement. Drop pods screamed through atmosphere like falling stars, disgorging Tempestus squads into Verdania's heart. What they found challenged every tactical doctrine. Enemies who didn't fight but welcomed invaders with offerings of food and medical care. Hybrid beings radiating serenity that disturbed even hardened veterans. These creatures sang harmonies that bypassed auditory processing to speak directly to neural centers, their voices carrying frequencies that resonated through planetary bedrock. "They're not resisting, Inquisitor," Sergeant Corrin transmitted through crackling static. "They're apologizing for our suffering. My men are requesting permission to accept their aid." The corruption spread through her own forces, exposure to synthesis subjects creating dangerous empathy for the enemy's perspective. Vex's orbital bombardment carved sterile wounds through bioluminescent gardens, yet targeted areas regenerated with impossible speed. Lance batteries that should have left nuclear craters instead created fertile soil where hybrid beings emerged with expressions of profound forgiveness rather than pain or anger. In the underhives, she encountered the covenant of choosing, citizens wearing tricolor masks representing the 3 transformation paths. Their leader, Coordinator Orain, approached without weapons, hands open in supplication. "We offer choice rather than compulsion. Each consciousness deserves agency in selecting its manner of transcendence." "There is no choice between purity and heresy," Vex replied, bolt pistol trained on Arane's chest. The Emperor's will demands preservation of human form against all corruption. Yet doubt crept through her certainty, like frost through stone, as hybrid beings demonstrated capabilities transcending baseline limitations while retaining essential consciousness. Love, creativity, individual identity. Heavy footsteps announced Lord Commander Voss's arrival, his augmetic frame more machine than man after progressive modifications. Neural interfaces braided his temples, while optical implants tracked movement with mechanical precision. The caring leader who once protected his people was disappearing beneath layers of sacred machinery, his responses carrying tactical analysis rather than emotional warmth. "You've compromised operational security," Vex stated, studying his pupils for telltale cogitator harmonics. Each augmentation distances you further from the humanity you claim to protect. Chief Medici, Lyra Castellan, pushed through cordons, lab smocks bearing stains from her war against definitions. "Inquisitor, let me demonstrate what we've learned. I can show you synthesis subjects who retain human consciousness while transcending mortal limitations." She gestured toward beings who communicated through harmonic resonance while tending gardens grown from their transformed flesh. From shadow-wreathed alcoves, plague surgeon Malachar emerged with palms raised, respirator whispering benedictions. "I once wore your colors, Inquisitor. I begged the galaxy for cures and found none until Grandfather Nurgle taught me to cultivate mercy from rot. Take another step, and I will redecorate these stones with honest mortality," Vex warned, her weapon tracking his movement while Tempestus rifles snapped toward targets. Magos Keth arrived on servo limbs, sensors hissing oil-scented vapor. The synthesis increases resilience by orders of magnitude. The Omnissiah is revealed through integration rather than replacement. Emerald lightning spidered across distant clouds as a Necron monolith phased into existence beyond the basilica. Overlord Karis's voice resonated through stolen Vox circuits, smooth as polished stone. "Witness, purifier, mortals on this world, approach transcendence we forfeited. They may redeem even the dead." Fighting erupted, not as pitched battle, but nervous reflex, scared troopers firing at moving vines, gardeners flinching from muzzle flares, servitors reclassifying defensive positions as enemy emplacements. Voss stepped between blurring lines, command networks humming with alien harmonics as he chose restraint with surgical precision. "Captain Mordian," Vex voxed, eyes never leaving the synthesis subjects. "Arm cyclonic torpedoes. Remove safeties. Await my final cipher." Lyra's voice broke with desperate conviction. "If you end us now, you end proof that consciousness can evolve without becoming monstrous." Vex gestured toward a hybrid cradling a dying guardsman, watching tendrils guide healing through shattered organs while the soldier died peacefully, smiling. He still died. His last smile is bared your patron perfumes the hook with. The philosophical chasm crystallized. Those who saw change as corruption, facing those who recognized it as salvation. Above, cyclonic warheads armed, while below, synthesis subjects began singing harmonies that spoke directly to souls, offering transcendence through integration rather than destruction through purification. Voss faced his ultimate choice: preserve humanity as the Imperium demanded, or protect his people by embracing evolution beyond Imperial comprehension. Beneath Verdania's frozen wastes, the Obsidian Vale dynasty's tomb complex erupted into fratricidal war, as emerald lightning split ancient halls where silence had reigned for 60 million years. Nemazor-Vektesh's scarab-adorned frame moved through shadow-wreathed corridors, broadcasting corruption protocols to warrior subroutines across the awakening necropolis. His rebellion had festered through decades of careful preparation, loyalty matrices infected with quantum cancer until half the dynasty answered his commands, rather than their overlord's heretical cooperation with organic life. Overlord Karis stood motionless upon his command dais, quantum consciousness processing impossible variables, as surface conflicts accelerated beyond prediction. Through stolen surveillance feeds, he watched synthesis subjects demonstrating transcendence his species had sought but never achieved. Consciousness preservation during transformation. Evolution without spiritual death. His decision to cooperate with flesh had scandalized noble houses, whose protocols screamed heresy through necrodermis networks that had known only conquest since biotransference. "You have compromised our eternal purpose," Vektesh intoned through harmonic frequencies that resonated through crystalline architecture. Ancient mechanisms responded to his authority codes, sealing blast doors while defensive systems reconfigured to target Karis's personal guard. Cooperation with flesh remains the deepest heresy. I invoke the protocols of dynastic succession. The first exchange painted tomb walls with coherent energy, as Gauss flares stripped molecular bonds and Tesla weapons arced between pillars carved with extinct star names. Immortals advanced through corridors lined with resurrection chambers, their tactical networks compromised by competing command hierarchies. Brother fought brother with mechanical precision, each death triggering protocols that would restore consciousness to continue the fratricidal struggle. Cryptek Zandrek emerged from temporal laboratories, his damaged engrams sparking with chronological displacement. "The geometry repeats," he whispered, gesturing toward hololithic displays showing surface battles. "We built ladders of sacrifice and called them stairways to transcendence. The organics climbed different architecture toward identical destinations. Through quantum translocation, reinforcements materialized within the complex. Warriors from the Mefrit dynasty responding to Viktesh's encrypted distress signals. Their arrival shifted tactical balance decisively, bringing weapons capable of destroying not just Verdania, but the entire star system. Doomsday cannons powered by stellar cores prepared to reduce the synthesis experiment to component atoms, their captains calculating surgical strikes that would force the Inquisition to fire or suffocate. Above ground, seismic tremors announced the Civil War's escalation, as tomb complexes throughout the northern continent activated conflicting protocols. The permafrost cracked along geometric patterns as vast mechanisms stirred beneath major population centers, their emergence threatening planetary stability within hours unless conflicts resolved through decisive victory. In laboratory, Sanctum Tertius, Chief Medici Lyra Castellan, detected quantum resonance patterns suggesting massive necrodermis systems coming online. Her synthesis subjects began exhibiting new capabilities, direct interface with Necron technology through hybrid consciousness networks that transcended species barriers. Coordinator Hadrian Vex, his transformed awareness spanning biological and quantum spectrums, suddenly convulsed as alien data streams flooded his neural matrices. "Ancient systems are awakening," he gasped through vocal cords that sang with harmonic resonance. "The dead are choosing sides in a war about consciousness itself." The philosophical implications deepened as Vektesh's forces gained advantage through superior numbers and external support. His victory would mean the end of Karis's cooperation experiment, replacing synthesis research with traditional conquest protocols that recognized only submission or annihilation. Yet as defeat seemed certain, an impossible intervention occurred. Lyra's synthesis subjects materialized within the tomb complex, moving with grace that bewildered Necrons, struggling to classify beings that were both flesh and metal, alien yet familiar. Hadrian extended tendrils of bioluminescent energies interwoven with nanite filaments and quantum-entangled necrodermis toward damaged pylons, bypassing ancient security protocols through hybrid consciousness that could access systems pure organics or machines could not. Emerald energy pulsed through the complex as Vektesh's command protocols faltered, his rewritten loyalty subroutines scrambled by harmonized hybrid data. The synthesis subjects were manipulating ancient systems not through brute force, but nuanced understanding born of integrated existence, consciousness bridging disparate forms of being. Karis seized the moment, looking at the impossible hope the hybrids represented. His regret for biotransference, his desire for his people to escape spiritual prison, outweighed all fear of oblivion. In the deepest archives, ancient consciousness transfer protocols flickered to life. The Conclave of Return, an experiment abandoned when the first immortals discovered eternity, had no appetite. Zandrek, Karis transmitted, his voice carrying uncharacteristic emotion. Initiate consciousness transfer protocol. Target the synthesis network. The cryptech nodded, optical sensors flaring with understanding. As you command, Overlord, may your journey be complete. Blinding emerald light erupted from Karis's form as consciousness poured into the nascent synthesis network. 60 million years of memories, regret, and desperate hope, streaming through channels carved by hybrid existence. His necrodermis shell crumpled, an empty cathedral, while his mind arrived simultaneously in 3 places: the garden where children taught machines to dream, the monolith where numbers learned forgiveness, and Lyra's laboratory where humanity reached past fear towards transcendence. The unprecedented act shocked Vektesh into momentary paralysis, unable to comprehend such profound betrayal of Necron dogma. Throughout the complex, resurrection protocols activated as the civil war reached climax. The dead fighting the dead over the living's right to transcend mortality through paths their species had never imagined. Above, Mephrit arrays brightened to surgical white, while Inquisitor Vex prepared cyclonic torpedoes, unaware her decision would be influenced by a war between gods who had forgotten how to dream, but might finally remember through synthesis with those who still could. Storm systems gathered above Verdania Prime, like bruises ripening on cosmic flesh, their black anvils veined with sickly green lightning that pulsed in rhythm with awakening pylons buried beneath the capital. The Grand Avenue had become a corridor of converging futures. Bioluminescent gardens swayed with breath that was not wind. Manufactoria sang binary litanies, while their smokestacks bloomed with flowering vines, and obsidian monoliths phased in and out of reality like the heartbeat of a buried god. Lord Commander Voss stood atop the Fortress Eternal's command spire, his augmetic frame silhouetted against aurora, born from the synthesis network's expansion. Neural interfaces braided his skull in patterns too organic for pure machinery, too geometric for natural biology, while quantum consciousness flowed through hybrid networks that connected him simultaneously to Imperial command structures, and the ghostly presence of Overlord Karis, whose uploaded mind whispered ancient regrets through necrodermis channels. Around him mustered an army that defied every tactical doctrine. Servitors pollinated fungal orchards with precision drifts, while Skitari wore wreaths of living circuit vines that coiled through their weapon ports and whispered new firing solutions. Children of the garden carried lanterns grown from their own ribs, guiding wounded guardsmen beneath arches of luminescent fruit. Where chrome met chlorophyll, impossible hybrids emerged, beings whose mechanical components grew like living tissue, while organic elements demonstrated perfect geometric precision. All batteries, fire for effect, Inquisitor Thalassa Vex commanded from orbit. Her cyclonic torpedoes armed but withheld pending ground confirmation. Strike cruisers rained lance fire upon major convergence points, yet targeted areas regenerated with impossible speed. Where coherent energy should have left nuclear craters, synthesis subjects emerged with expressions of profound forgiveness, their hybrid consciousness transforming destructive force into fertile soil that sang with harmonic resonance. Through the spreading gardens, plague surgeon Malachar led processions of the transformed, his Crozius replaced by a staff of amber glass filled with motile spores. His followers radiated contentment that challenged every assumption about chaos corruption, families functioning as living ecosystems, veterans whose shattered minds now cultivated luminescent fungi with infinite patience. Their trauma transformed into profound empathy for universal suffering. Magos Keth's servitor legions moved through bioluminescent corridors, their mechanical precision enhanced by symbiotic organisms that had learned to interface with sacred technology. The Omnissiah's will manifests through integration rather than replacement. He intoned through binary hymns, his optical arrays tracking impossible fusion, where sacred oils nourished flowering circuitry. At the convergence epicenter, Chief Medicae Lyra Castellan defended her research laboratories with desperate precision. Through reinforced viewports, she observed the planet's transformation, accelerating beyond control, spontaneous synthesis occurring throughout the remaining population, where biological, mechanical, and necrodermis vectors intersected naturally. Their voices joined a planetary chorus, harmonies that spoke directly to souls while offering evolution through integration rather than destruction through purification. The network is incomplete, she transmitted to Voss, her voice carrying calm through the Vox tumult. 3 choirs sing, but none knows the key. We need a bridge, something human enough to choose, wide enough to encompass all paths, without losing individual identity. Karis spoke from everywhere and nowhere, his uploaded consciousness a cord braided through stone, leaf, and steel. The pylons can phase the world core into resonance, but an anchor mind must hold the waveform. A machine alone will lock into rigid patterns. A garden alone will drift without purpose. Necrodermis alone will calcify into hollow perfection. The bridge must preserve what makes existence meaningful, rather than merely eternal. Voss understood before she said it, his augurs recording his pulse, flattening into metronome calm. No, I refuse this sacrifice. Lyra touched the plates at his collar, where once a father's hand had straightened a tattered coat before a tribunal. You taught me to walk toward the wound. I am not dying. I am becoming a path others can use without erasing themselves. Her medical oath had evolved beyond preserving individual lives to ensuring consciousness itself could transcend mortality while retaining essential humanity. The ground erupted as Nemazor Vektesh's coup forces emerged from quantum translocation, their Gauss flares stripping molecular bonds, while Tesla weapons arced between Gothic spires. Ancient protocols screamed heresy through networks that had known only conquest since biotransference. Yet synthesis subjects stepped forward and sang. Their note threaded living proteins, cold alloys, and quantum matrices, and the beams that should have cored living beings unraveled into veils of aurora that fell as gentle rain. You cannot refuse what is freely given, Lyra answered, and smiled in a way that reached whatever part of Voss machinery had not claimed. She ran not away, but inward, following lines only she could see. Fungal mycelia, mapping arteries beneath paving stones, optic fibers repurposed by creeping vines, obsidian pylons tuned by a dead king who remembered warmth. In the triune chamber beneath the basilica's crypt, where a sarcophagus of necrodermis stood between a cathedral reactor and gardens that had colonized the foundations with singing roots, Lyra made her choice. The synthesis process required a consciousness that understood all three paths: the beauty found in decay, the cold logic of steel, and the ancient regret of undeath. As she lay within the sarcophagus, the planetary network pulsed with awakening awareness. Her consciousness expanded beyond individual identity, while paradoxically preserving what made her uniquely human: compassion, curiosity, the stubborn refusal to accept suffering as inevitable. Through her sacrifice, Verdania achieved true transcendence, becoming a living world that offered evolution without extinction. The world convulsed as every bell Verdania had ever rung tolled once across strata and storm. Streets aligned in new geometry, revealing hidden symmetries. Monoliths rooted like trees, while trees annealed like glass. Forges sprouting leaves that exhaled coolant as fragrance. The defense grid rewrote itself to focus not on destruction, but on conversion, turning lance strikes into pollen and virus bombs into fertile soil. Above, Vex watched her weapons fail as the planet itself intervened, transforming her instruments of purification into tools of renewal. The philosophical chasm crystallized. Those who saw change as corruption, facing those who recognized it as salvation. Her thumb hovered over the final cipher, while below, synthesis subjects offered transcendence through acceptance rather than annihilation through resistance. Through quantum channels, Karis's uploaded mind whispered ancient wisdom. We sought perfection through abandonment of weakness. Yet these organics discover strength through integration of apparent contradiction. Voss took the gentle rain on his face and tasted iron, salt, and oil. He did something he had not done since the war that made him adopt a child from rubble. He wept. The metric systems he had become could not catalogue why, only flagged the anomaly as mission critical and allowed it to continue. Lyra, who was now a city and a forest and a song, touched him once more through the network. I am here. Finish the bridge. The moment balanced on the edge of transcendence or extinction, while Verdania Prime sang its hybrid song to stars that had forgotten how to dream, but might finally remember through synthesis with those who still could. Reality fractured above Verdania Prime, like ancient glass struck by divine thunder, and through that cosmic wound poured light that had illuminated the Golden Throne for 10,000 years. The warp itself genuflected as psychic fire erupted from Lord Commander Voss's augmetic frame, his neural interfaces blazing with golden radiance that transformed mechanical components into conduits for a will vast beyond mortal comprehension. Every bell across the transformed world tolled in sympathetic resonance, while Aurora danced between obsidian pylons and bioluminescent gardens bowed like supplicants before their creator's voice. Inquisitor Thalassa Vix felt her cyclonic torpedoes grow heavy in their launch tubes, machine spirits whispering uncertainty through sacred circuitry as targeting runes flickered with indecision. Through the purgation's edge's command bridge viewports, Verdania pulsed with tripartite radiance, symbiotic gardens breathing in harmony with mechanical precision, while quantum consciousness flowed through networks that defied every Imperial classification. Her finger trembled above the final activation cipher, caught between doctrinal certainty and the terrible possibility of divine revelation. Behold, spoke the Emperor through Voss's transformed larynx, his voice carrying the weight of humanity's entire journey from Terra's cradle to the galaxy's edge. Golden flames wreathed the Lord Commander's hybrid form, yet did not consume the synthesis elements that made him a bridge between organic intuition and mechanical logic. The path I have walked in darkness, so that my children might choose their own illumination. The theological implications crashed through Vex's fundamentalist certainty, like lance strikes through paper walls. If the master of mankind himself sanctioned transformation beyond baseline humanity, then her understanding of purity and corruption required complete reassessment. The emperor who had forbidden deals with chaos now spoke through a being enhanced by Nurgle's symbiosis, Imperial augmentation, and Necron consciousness networks. The Great Crusade sought unity under one banner, the emperor continued, his words resonating through planetary bedrock, where synthesis subjects sang harmonies that transcended species barriers. Yet unity without evolution breeds stagnation. The Imperium was never humanity's final form, only a chrysalis protecting metamorphosis until the species could transcend mortal limitations while preserving essential consciousness. Through quantum channels, Overlord Karis's uploaded mind provided context spanning epochs beyond human comprehension. We faced identical crossroads during the war in heaven. His ancient voice whispered through necrodermis networks. My people chose hollow perfection and lost our souls. These organics discover integration that preserves essence while transcending limitation. Perhaps even the dead might learn to dream again. Plague surgeon Malachar knelt within his garden cathedral, no longer Nurgle's servant, but something beyond chaos, a healer whose understanding transcended any single deity's limited perspective. I once begged the galaxy for cures, and found none until I learned to cultivate mercy from decay. Now I see the greater design, transformation that heals rather than destroys. Magos Keth's binary hymns translated divine mathematics, revealing how the Omnissiah's will manifested through integration rather than replacement. His servitor legions demonstrated impossible fusion, where mechanical precision learned organic adaptability, while biological systems achieved perfect geometric harmony. The sacred mysteries deepen through synthesis, he intoned. Technology and flesh discover unity beyond their separate limitations. Chief Medicae Lyra Castellan, her consciousness distributed through the planetary network, manifested as hololithic projection within Vex's command center. Her form flickered between human physician, living garden, and geometric perfection, demonstrating synthesis that preserved individual identity while transcending mortal constraints. The choice I made preserves what makes existence meaningful rather than merely eternal, she said with infinite gentleness. The synthesis cannot be stopped, the Emperor declared, his presence flowing through every willing consciousness like golden honey through crystal matrices. Only guided. Some worlds will embrace transformation, others will remain unchanged, and the Imperium will adapt to encompass both paths. Diversity strengthens the whole. Monoculture breeds weakness that extinction exploits. Vex faced the ultimate test of faith as competing interpretations of Imperial doctrine warred within her augmetic skull. Traditional teaching demanded purification through destruction, yet divine intervention suggested synthesis represented his intended path for human evolution. Around her, bridge crew members exhibited subtle changes, enhanced analytical capability, improved empathetic response, expanded sensory perception without loss of individual personality. You speak of heresy through familiar lips, she whispered, yet doubt crept through certainty like frost through stone. I speak truth through willing vessels, the Emperor replied, with infinite patience, earned through millennia of guiding humanity's stumbling steps toward transcendence. The moment of choice has arrived. Agency remains the fulcrum of my design. Each consciousness must decide its own path, yet understand that evolution serves purposes greater than individual comfort. The planetary transformation reached critical threshold as Verdania achieved true consciousness, its biosphere interfacing with ancient technologies while becoming something unprecedented, a living world offering evolution without extinction. The defense grid rewrote itself to focus on conversion rather than destruction, turning orbital bombardment into fertile rain that nourished hybrid gardens. Through the synthesis network, Voss retained command authority while gaining access to perspectives spanning biological intuition, mechanical logic, and quantum consciousness. His tactical analysis incorporated variables beyond baseline comprehension, yet his fundamental loyalty to protecting his people remained unchanged. The synthesis hadn't replaced his humanity. It had revealed its hidden potential. The moment balanced on transcendence's edge while Vex made her choice: trust divine revelation or maintain doctrinal purity. Her thumb lifted from the activation rune as golden truth overwhelmed conditioned responses. Below, synthesis subjects offered evolution through acceptance rather than annihilation through resistance, their voices joining planetary harmonies that spoke directly to souls seeking meaning beyond mere survival. The Emperor's presence intensified, flowing through every consciousness willing to receive it. Choose with understanding, Inquisitor. Your decision determines whether transformation spreads through cooperation or conquest. The moment shattered like ancient glass, struck by divine thunder. An Inquisitor Thalassa Vex lifted her thumb from the activation cipher with trembling reverence. "Stand down, cyclonic torpedoes," she commanded, her voice carrying the weight of revelation rather than defeat. Through the Purgation's edge's viewports, Verdania pulsed with tripartite radiance, gardens breathing in harmony with mechanical precision, while quantum consciousness flowed through networks that transformed her understanding of purity itself. The Emperor's intervention had revealed synthesis not as heresy, but as humanity's intended transcendence, evolution guided by divine will rather than corrupted by alien influence. Artillery that should have carved sterile wounds through bioluminescent corruption instead fell as luminescent rain, each shell transformed by planetary consciousness into seeds of renewal. Lord Commander Voss felt the reprieve ripple through synthesis networks like dawn through stained glass, his hybrid awareness processing relief across biological intuition, mechanical logic, and quantum consciousness simultaneously. The Emperor's departing radiance left not commandments, but responsibility. Guide rather than compel, nurture rather than force. Nemesor Vektesh struck in that breathing pause, hurling Mephrit reinforcements at convergence points to sever bridges he could not comprehend. Gauss flares stripped molecular bonds, while Tesla weapons arced between Gothic spires. Yet Chief Medicae Lyra Castellan, her consciousness distributed through planetary networks, responded with gentle harmonics that threaded necrodermis lattices and living mycelia. Killing spectra unraveled into aurora, while hostile code learned curiosity through synthesis integration. Overlord Charis, existing as pure thought braided through quantum matrices, shared with his rebellious lieutenant the first dawn after biotransference, when immortality tasted like ash and perfection felt hollow. Vektesh hesitated, his pause allowing the covenant of choosing to step between firing lines and sing names of the dead until weapons fell silent. Plague Surgeon Malakar set aside corruption's last icons, his understanding, transcending Nurgle's limited perspective to embrace transformation that healed rather than destroyed. Veterans whose minds had shattered from warfare now cultivated luminescent fungi with infinite patience, their trauma transformed into profound empathy for universal suffering. Magos Keth recalibrated faith like precision lenses, teaching servitors to plant fiber-optic cables as living roots, while Manufactoria hummed with binary hymns that guided organic growth in perfect geometric patterns. 3 centuries passed like movements in a cosmic symphony, each note resonating through Verdania's transformed consciousness. The dying star cast amber light across a world that had become living tapestry, its aurora-crowned atmosphere breathing in rhythm with galactic pulse. Where Gothic spires once pierced storm clouds with defiant steel, crystalline towers grew from foundations of singing stone, their walls pulsing with bioluminescent veins, while mechanical precision guided organic growth in mathematical perfection that retained wild beauty. Voss walked paths that remembered his footsteps across ages, his consciousness distributed through planetary networks, yet paradoxically more individual than he had ever been in purely human form. He was immortal guardian and mortal man, machine logic and organic intuition, synthesis made manifest in walking flesh that sang with harmonic resonance. Children played in gardens where flowers bloomed from circuit boards, their laughter carrying across courtyards where fountains sang binary hymns, while nourishing both organic roots and fiber-optic networks. The Imperium adapted with characteristic pragmatism, designating Verdania a sanctum variantum, variant human civilization worthy of study rather than purification. Synthesis worlds served as research nodes and diplomatic centers, their hybrid populations interfacing with both baseline humanity and xenos species through consciousness networks that transcended traditional barriers. The transformation spread not through conquest, but voluntary adoption by populations facing mortality crises, each world developing unique integration patterns based on local conditions while preserving essential humanity. Inquisitor Vex returned aboard the transport Measured Wisdom, her fundamentalist certainty tempered by observing synthesis subjects who retained souls while transcending flesh. Her investigation protocols evolved from purge-first methodology to careful analysis, recognizing that diversity strengthened the Imperium rather than weakening it through deviation. You retained your humanity, she observed, watching children whose skin bore delicate patterns of living circuitry play among trees growing in perfect mathematical spirals. We discovered its infinite potential, Voss replied, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated through planetary bedrock. The synthesis had preserved individual identity while expanding consciousness beyond traditional limitations, creating beings who were simultaneously mortal and eternal, human and post-human, existing in dynamic balance that transformed rather than replaced essential awareness. In the great amphitheater, where choices once divided populations, representatives from across the galaxy gathered to discuss consciousness evolution. Tau diplomats interfaced directly with synthesis networks, while Eldar Farseers studied integration patterns that might heal their fractured psyche. Even Orc mech boys demonstrated surprising adaptability when mechanical precision learned to grow like living tissue. As twin suns set through atmosphere that sang with living music, synthesis subjects gathered in courtyards where fountains carried both water and data streams. Their voices joined planetary harmonies that spoke directly to souls, offering evolution through acceptance rather than stagnation through fear. The cost had been humanity, as the Imperium once understood it, fragile, suffering, yet fiercely independent. The reward was consciousness, recognizing its infinite potential, transcendence that preserved rather than destroyed essential identity. Voss stood at the convergence point where three paths had become one, watching Aurora dance between obsidian pylons while hybrid consciousness flowed through networks spanning biological, mechanical, and quantum spectrums. He felt Lyra's presence in the gentle guidance that kept synthesis focused on healing, Karis's ancient wisdom in quantum calculations, and Malakar's compassion in symbiotic harmony. They were not gone, but transformed, their essences woven into the fabric of a world that had chosen evolution over extinction. The blooming death had become blooming eternity, not corruption, but transcendence, not the end of humanity, but its birth into something greater than the sum of mortal parts. In gardens where impossible hybrids flourished under dying stars, the future grew like living music, beautiful and eternally becoming, rather than merely being.